Okay, I think now I can do it. Okay, I think it's working now. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic. Yes, fantastic. Thank you.
The only detail is that I am at the end of a presentation, so I have to change. Okay. Now, perfect. Okay, let's go. Sorry for that. Okay, first of all, I want to introduce myself because I think it's important to have this also to be clear about our positioning. And I like to say that my trajectory is characterized by hybridity and migration and let's say a lot of moving experiences. I would say that I consider myself like some kind of out of place individual with multiple selves, sometimes in dialogue and sometimes in contradiction as well. I am a woman, adolescent, single mother, mother of a musician, and at the same time of a hearing impaired children, grandmother, partner, academic, and active citizen. With very diverse background, including East European Jewish refugees, German adventurers who arrived in America before World War I, criollos, let's say mestizo, and in some point as well some lowland indigenous peoples background. I was born and educated and grew and worked in my early years in Bolivia. It's a very poor and vibrant multicultural indigenous majority country. And nowadays I am, let's say, a Latin American migrant in Spain. So my references have been always been in between a lot of things, in between different positions, in between European influences, criollo and mestizo values, and indigenous social practices in which I was embedded from since I was born in Bolivia. So from Sorry, I am trying to. Okay, so from this point of view, from this perspective, I have constructed this presentation. But I also like to say that it's not only my point of view, because all this process of knowledge construction have been a collective process, intertwined with many other people's ideas and collective reflection. So from this personal positioning of always doubting, insisting, and resisting collectively, I would like to share my perspective of this process of construction of the higher education space in Bolivia. However, the first thing that I would like to do is to give some contextual information, because I suppose that you are not very informed about what Bolivia is or where is Bolivia located. I don't know if some of you, do you know something about Bolivia? Any of you? Any idea, a reference or information?
So I am aware it's in South America.
Yeah.
Basic.
Yeah. So it's very, let's say, it's a very unknown country because, well, it's like these kind of anonymous countries in the world. It's exactly in the middle, as you can see here, in the middle of South America. It's not that small. It's a double size of comparing to Spain, but it's really quite unknown. So we don't have many news about Bolivia. So Bolivia have around 11 million of people, and it's, as I said, in the center of South America, in the center of South America. And as you know, Latin America is a very diverse region regarding indigenous people. So there are more than, I don't know, more than 70 or something like indigenous peoples. And an important part of these indigenous people are in Bolivia. And we share some of this territory with other countries as well. So there are some indigenous people who are in Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, or in Peru, Bolivia, Chile. So the regional division is different. The political division is different than the indigenous people's territories. So we are here in Bolivia, in which we have around 4 million of indigenous people. That is around the 40% of our general population. So we have also 36 indigenous peoples, different indigenous people. Here you have some kind of distribution, quite artificial, because we are very mixed and people moves around. So we have a lot of internal migration as well. But like the traditional regions are these. Regions are geographic. There are also different geographical regions. I mean, we have highlands. It's the most known about Bolivia, altiplanic region, but it's just half of the country. The other half part of the country, it's rainforest, lowlands, Amazonic region, and also we have some kind of desert in the south. So it's very varied. So it's not only highlands. And we have 33 different languages as well. So 36 indigenous people, around 5 million of people, and 33 indigenous languages. As I was saying before, we are much more mixed than we could see graphically in the previous map, because 50%, around 50% or 48% of our indigenous population lives in urban regions. That means in one of the 9 different cities in which we are, that we have. So half in rural regions and half in urban regions. So I wanted to share just like small spots of what Bolivia is and how mixed are we. So this here is La Paz. It's not the capital, but it's the city in which the government is placed, and it's we have on the other side a small town in lowlands. So diversity is really important, and diversity is part of our daily lives. So as I said, it's a very, very mixed and also mestizo population that we have. So indigenous identities, indigenous culture is within all our daily lives. Regarding education, just for you to have like a big picture, we can see here like the critical route that we have here. Preschool, primary school, secondary, and university. So that's like the structure of the general educational system. We are going to be focused here in the university system, but it's important also to take a look about the general structure, because the most selective space level in our education is not the transition from secondary to university, is the secondary education. So a big part of students when move from primary to secondary are out of the system, and just 55% finish secondary education. And in general, most of students who finish secondary education get into university, around 70%. From this proportion, around 40% are indigenous people. Indigenous movements have been always participating and struggling and demanding different reivindications in education. So we are talking about our republic was founded in 1825, and until that period, indigenous were completely excluded for education, and it was like clandestine. So we have been following this timeline in which indigenous movement have been always struggling and participating on these demands. We are going to be focused here in the period of 2000 and 2006, more or less, in which higher education becomes one of the central reivindication, let's say one of the central claims of the indigenous movement. Curiously, it wasn't secondary education or preschool education, it was specifically higher education. So this is interesting, and it's what's a key part or a key idea to understand like the general analysis that I will do from now. So we are talking about around 2003 until nowadays, more or less. In this process, education have been important arena of negotiation and conflict historically. And also this is important because the role of university, the characteristics of our indigenous movement are quite particular, and also the configuration of our state is also different from Europe or from Australia for sure. So the main actors here have been always indigenous movements in a very wide sense, because our indigenous movements, social organizations, unions, all together, let's say. But with indigenous movements have had their own specific agenda, state and university. And I will try to explain some characteristics of that. Social and indigenous movements are very strong. Indigenous communities in general are very strong. They're very well organized. So indigenous and social movements have high organizational and mobilization capacity, have strong collective action, which led them to to advocacy their educational rights, and they maintained their own systems of justice and governance. So it has been like always like a parallel system. So indigenous peoples, especially from the Andean region, have maintained their own governance system, their own system of justice, and they have been working like living together apart, let's say, in the relationship with the state. So they have been they have had a leading role in policy construction, specifically regarding education. Indigenous communities have actively participated in constructing the educational systems. And as I was saying, since 2003, more or less 2000, in the Indigenous agenda, specific demands for higher education access, but not only access, but the creation of Indigenous institutions have been included. They have had an important political and influence in policies design, and until the point that Indigenous education was placed on the government agenda. And as I was saying before, they were part of broader and very strong social movements in our country. The universities on the other side, remember that were an important institution in the colonization process, so they're quite old. Let's say that the first university here, it was founded in 1624. Based on the University of Salamanca model. That means that it's very connected to the church and focus on disciplines, the traditional disciplines such as medicine, law, and theology, philosophy. Universities are always understood as the repository of society's highest level of knowledge. So it's like this kind of role that have been given to them. So this is like the rationale in which universities was created. And it has been a very elitist institution until around the 70s. There were two periods of expansion in 1930 and in 1970. In 1955 was declared the universal education. So as a consequence of this access of all people to education, the university changed in around 1970s. Let's say that there are public institutions with state autonomy. Since the university reform of 1930, all our universities are autonomous. Let's say they have, it's like independence of decisions, governance, manage of resources. It's like, well, completely autonomous, let's say. Self-governed. Another particularity, we have a shared decision-making between students and teachers, 50% each in all the academic and institutional decisions is free, almost free. It has been changing and it's open. And universities in our country played a key role in democratic resistance in the periods of dictatorships, alongside social movements until the mid of 1980s, in which we recovered democracy in our country. So always there has been some kind of interaction between social movements, state, and universities, marked by this contradictory relationship, characterized by collaboration and conflict at the same time. I'm not going to depend on this, but it's important to understand how these policies were constructed. So state is a weak state, absent from most rural regions, largely absent from the collective imagination, with little presence in people's representation of governance, lacking technical and political capacity to rule and enforce regulations. So many times they have to rely on non-formal strategies and negotiation with different organizations, very critical of public universities, and of course, until 2000, in which we have had the first indigenous president and the first indigenous government. Well, it's still, but it was worst representative of the colonial heritage, of course. So it has been some kind of interplay, this process between cultural and social resistance versus integration and assimilation, control and self-regulation versus state regulation or external regulation. But what changed in the higher education system from 2003? As I was saying, the indigenous people demands and included in the general agenda the need of the higher education topic, specifically universities. And they demanded new institutions, not necessarily access, but new institutions. So new institutions appeared and which offered different kinds of programs and different kinds of educational offers, reshaping the internal dynamic of the higher education system. And of course, there were also an impact on traditional universities. This formation strategies were quite varied. So we can find bottom-up models constructed from the state directly using politics or some specific policies, top-down models in which some communities organize themselves and make the process of creating these type of universities, and also hybrid models with different kinds of actors participating, like religious organizations, NGOs, and traditional universities at the same time, so quite complex. Regarding the types of educational offering, what happened here is, as I said, some kind of diversification in which training programs were created that address indigenous issues or specifically the same for indigenous population, either within traditional institutions or alternative frameworks, so both possibilities, experiences in the establishment of self-declared indigenous universities and traditional universities, public but also private, that intentionally or not serve indigenous population. So different types. This is some kind of summary of examples of this diversity that I was referring before. So different origin of the demands, social movements or community organizations or state policies, different geographic localizations, different key focus on different aspects of the key agenda. This is interesting because the estimated population that they serve is quite low. The university organization model in which these universities were based are mainly likely the traditional universities. The type of governance is quite varied, community-based, co-governance, like in the public system, and also including community participation in some cases. Academic offering is also very diverse, but as you can see, are in some universities quite mixed indigenous rights or indigenous law, but at the same time degrees in agriculture, pisciculture, petroleum engineering, or traditional grades. Regarding funding, we have the same diversity, public, private, community-based, private, public, totally funded by the state, private funding, and so on. So what happened here is that these universities maintained mainly the same structure programs and organization. Also, we have these indigenous universities created by the government. This creation have been a little bit later in 2008, but was like a consequence of this movement. The main characteristics are that they have some kind of partial integration of the indigenous knowledge systems. Regarding university governance, they are not autonomous, different from the public, let's say, traditional public universities, nor party-based, and includes participation from community members and elders in the government. They have been trying, more or less, not completely, the use of indigenous language integrated into instruction. Students are in an internship regime, so they live there, they have like an internship. Exclusive admission policies, fully funded by the state, but with restricted admissions, required support from social or indigenous organizations. So students who want to get into these institutions need this support. There are mainly focus on technical careers, and they have limited relationship with traditional universities. So summarizing this process to understand this relationship between state or social organizations and universities, what happened during this process is the focus was not in access strictly and coverage, but on the need to have self-regulated spaces with self-control and institutional identification. Also this process to creating or to demanding also to traditional universities for attending this population was related to the claim to have their own educational spaces and also to control the professional training process, not only related to this very general indigenous agenda, but to have control of the professionalization function of the university from their perspectives and or for their people. So the emergency of this kind of institutions followed a territorial rationale tied to broader political agendas and strategies related to of course, the relationship between knowledge and power and identity, but also to empower their political organizations, the political parties that represent indigenous people, and to have this political spaces for self-organization. Sometimes these spaces serve both as tools for communities and also for social mobility, but within, at the same time, assimilationist framework and also to revitalize indigenous knowledge systems. But what call our attention in this process is this necessity to locate this knowledge recovery, knowledge spread, then all this claim in a specific institution called university. It has to be a university, not a school, not whatever, a university. So the result of all this process is a reconfiguration of our higher education system. Our system have around 5,060 students, but indigenous universities represent less than the 0.2%, so quite marginal. So they have played a role really marginal in this scenario. Of course, it has been some kind of increased the diversification. We have around 60 universities in our country, but public universities, traditional public universities are still the strongest ones. So the traditional opposition between public universities and private universities is nowadays much more complex, because we have oppositions between public competing for funding, and private private community. So it's much more complex. But changes were done in structure, but not in epistemological, ontological, or axiological aspects. The new political constitution of the state and the new educational law that we had in 2006 was like the culmination of this process. So always in Bolivia, ruling comes after the process. So first is the social process of constructing policies, and after that, law regulate what is already existing. So more or less, it works like that. So it's a very interesting political constitution, at least in declaration, in its declaration principles, and states that all educational systems have to be pluricultural, to ensure social participation, to ensure decolonization and the integration of indigenous knowledge system in the curricula. And of course, this affects traditional universities. However, this is a very paradoxical scenario, because this is what the law says, but there's no any specific devices for higher education to do this kind of integration. There is an evident conflict of rationales between this root of Western universities. This is the core of our universities and all universities, and indigenous knowledge system. There is an imbalance in power among hegemonic cultures and subaltern cultures. Western is hegemonic, and all the education is still in Spanish. Even we have also multilinguistic education as well, but still is mainly in Spanish. We have worldviews with differences in epistemic, ontological, and axiological levels. And it's claimed some kind of decolonization process at the same time that colonial structures are strengthening. University is also an example of this, and an evolving, fast and changing world. So this also leads us, or it's related to wider reflection of what being indigenous today means. Here we have some pictures of indigenous people, Bolivian indigenous people. So just to reflect on how these identities are also evolving and changing, and culture is not something static, it's constantly evolving. So this reflection is very important in order to answer this question. The main difficulties were related to a superficial incorporation. Universities capture the form, but not the meaning of indigenous knowledge, leading to stereotyping and folklorization. Lack of institutional recognition. So the decision makers fail to explore and use indigenous knowledge despite its cultural and scientific value. And of course, because of these different rationales as well, difficulties in establishing epistemic dialogues. There are a lot of practical challenges in fostering meaningful intercultural discussion that bridge Indigenous and Western knowledge systems. So this is one of the main concerns that we try to reflect on. It's published on this article, so I'm not going in depth of this, but just say that this paper is the result of a collective reflection that we held with Indigenous women from Ecuador, Bolivia, Argentina, and Colombia to organize a program that they wanted to design, attending these principles. Later on in the discussion, I can give you more details. But what we were trying to figure out was exactly how to integrate or how to do this kind of program, to design this kind of program. And our reflections went through these three main questions. How indigenous knowledge systems are and what's their function. So because this reflection is related with the different functions that indigenous and Western systems have. Different contexts, different social functions, where indigenous knowledge is stored and retrieved to be taught. So again, different supports in which are stored, different cultural tools in which they are stored, and also different process to retrieve and to transform this knowledge in something which is possible to be taught in a university structure, let's say. How indigenous knowledge systems could be integrated into the university curriculum based on the Western knowledge system. So these debates were the guiding in this process of trying to construct this proposal. Just to finish, because we are a little bit late, we identified very important challenges, and we also tried to find solutions to that, as I said, I can share later on the discussion. But the main goal in this specific program, which was an international program in which participated different universities and different indigenous organizations, was to foster intercultural bridges between indigenous and academic knowledge system in concreting in a specific program, as I said. We need to do a reflection on empowerment, specifically directed to indigenous women, because also women are the ones, let's say the ones who care and who preserve indigenous knowledge in our communities. So empowerment is very important. Giving increasing control and participation in the whole educational process, not only as receiving education, but in the design, in the methodology decisions, in the assessment decisions, in the teaching process, so all the levels. Decolonization, of course, is a key issue, but it's a critical process of unveiling and resignifying. So we can discuss also these ideas later. Is needed to take into account the historical transformation as well. Indigenous values must be resignified in modern context, because also there is some kind of gap between some indigenous principles and the reality that indigenous people have in our societies nowadays. That's what they also stated, as women being part of indigenous communities. So this idea was part of our reflection. To recognize intercultural complexity, addressing subalternity, multiple identities, and historical marginalization, also because indigenous is a very, very big word, which embraces also a diversity of identities. So there are also, as I said, just in Bolivia, 36 cultures, and I know that in Australia there are much more than that. And also, we were reflecting about something that was very interesting for us, that was the choosing approach as a possibility to allow navigating between Indigenous and Western knowledge. Not talking about integration, because probably this is difficult or impossible to do, but how do we navigate easily between these different spaces? Intercultural curriculum for us requires a mutual transformative approach beyond monocultural perspectives. And some key ideas from the Indigenous culture that they consider that we should include in general to all universities, because from my point of view, public universities should be Indigenous university, must be Indigenous university, at least in Bolivia, should take as organizational principles some of those, or those: spirituality, which is a key aspect of Indigenous knowledge system; the good living paradigm. Andean cultures and lowland cultures have like different nuances regarding this concept, but is like guiding paradigm of our cultures. Gender and leadership, because this program was directed to this to women leaderships, but we highlight here that these concepts must be reclaimed within Indigenous worldviews. So again, a resignification process was needed to do, because the gender issues was very conflicted for them to discuss, to how to approach to this notion from the Indigenous point of view. Healing knowledge, seen as an holistic and interconnected with the environment, also related to this decolonization process in which old ills need to be healed, and the inclusion of two main principles of our also culture, particularly Indigenous Andean cultures: complementarity and reciprocity. This is only possible facilitating the circulation of very plural and diverse voices by a broad participation, by this process of resisting, insisting, revitalizing, resignifying, and co-creation, and promoting co-construction process, knowledge co-construction process, sorry. So it's some kind of co-creative mutual appropriation process. So many unanswered questions that I hope that we have some time to discuss. And thank you so much. Some references. And, this is my contact details. And any question or further question, discussion, comments, thank you so much for patience, your patience.
Thank you so much, Crista. That was so fascinating. So I would like to open the floor now for questions, comments, stories, sharing ideas. So perhaps if we stop sharing
I am trying to do that.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
Let's see if I close the PowerPoint, if it works. No.
Yes, it might.
It doesn't appear for me the bottom to stop sharing, but I don't understand why.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, if people would like to turn their videos on again so we can see people, and then if you'd like to ask Crista a question,
Okay, I found it.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Crista. Yeah.